Hello, I'm Phil Little, host of the Private Investigator podcast. Thank you for joining us today. On our podcast, we talk about cases in the life of a private investigator and what the real life is like behind the scenes. And we also look at cases that we're working on. And then we have our guests come on that have been either team members with us or they're in the security or related fields of law enforcement. And, I've had thousands of people working at West Coast Detectives over the years. And in those early years, I used to pride myself on I knew everybody's at least their first name, and got on through the years that I didn't. But there's a few people down through the years that when I think of West Coast and I think back about the history, there's a names pop up, a few names. And one of those names is the person that's on today, Chris Jensen. He's an interesting person with an interesting background. And when he got involved at West Coast Detectives, he became part of our family and team and made a name for himself in our field. Then he went on to travel the world, and we'll talk about that. Chris, thank you for joining me and for our audio sound that we have.
Thank you so much for having me, Phil. And one thing you're right about, definitely became a part of the family.
And here we are both in Texas. I wound up here recently. You've been here a lot longer. But let's just jump into this and talk about where did you grow up, Chris, and then how did you wind up in California?
Well, I was born and raised in California. Grew up in the Valley. So,
so you were in San Fernando Valley. Somehow I was thinking that you were someplace else and came there. But so how was it did you have an early interest growing up in security related field or private investigative training? Where did all that start?
yeah, very young. I was a big Get Smart fan. My wife actually used to babysit his kids.
Oh, really? Oh,
and,
cool.
I have every one of those shows on video, but and it was that really got me interested in the electronics, in the surveillance, counter surveillance, and we started doing the nanny cam and doorbell cams back 30 years ago, before they were even known about. But I did some training early. It was I was probably 20 when I first went to my first investigative and security academy. And then I was a plainclothes detective for the May Company in Arcadia. I ended up specializing in dishonest employees and started learning interview techniques and things like that. And when I had a chance to go to West Coast Detectives, I jumped right on it and just really pursued it as a full-time career.
I'd kind of forgotten about that, the nanny cam and all the camera stuff, because we were into that, and I'd forgotten that you were into that too. Now, were you making some of those things, or were you getting them?
No, we manufactured everything.
Yeah.
We did address signs and doorbell cams, and you saw many of the ones we did because we installed a bunch of them.
Right.
But those were all made by us. We didn't buy anything over the counter. It was all handcrafted.
Well, and what's really unique now is all the technology we have, that it's so easy to set up a remote wireless that is got a good long life to it. So that it's so, like our whole technology is at our field has changed so dramatically. People ask me, well, how was it when you started? Well, when I started, it was all shoe leather and knocking on doors and looking at some microfiche at the Hall of
Records. The courthouse.
Yeah,
and
now
you had a back seat full of Thomas guides.
That's right.
Oh, yes.
I still don't know how I did it. When I first started out of law enforcement, and I was doing a lot of insurance work where we did those inspections, we'd go out to the homes and we would spend 15, 20 minutes with the people, just making sure that they were really sick. But I would be driving all over Southern California. I don't know how I did it. I don't think I could do that today.
I don't think I could either. I don't know how we did it. It was, you're driving with trying to keep up with them in heavy traffic in LA, and you got a map book open on your lap the whole time. I don't know how we did it.
Well, there's good and bad things in this technology, I guess, too. But in when you look back on that career time before you went overseas and did some things, what was the thing that you were most passionate about? What part of your career and all that stuff you did would you say you were the most passionate about?
I really like to get into the hidden camera stuff with the dishonest employees and the nannies. And we did some elderly homes to get elderly abuse. And I just had a real passion for that. I've always had a passion of helping others. Before I joined West Coast, I don't know if you remember, I had a 501 nonprofit called COBA, Children Orphaned by AIDS Foundation,
Mm,
where we facilitated open adoptions for healthy children that were left behind when their AIDS affected parents passed away. So
wow.
that we tried to keep them from going into the red tape and facilitated open adoptions through an attorney. So I've always had that soft spot to watch out
Oh,
for
that's
the
right.
people that couldn't watch out for themselves.
Well, I'd forgotten about that, but that's awesome. You and Wayne had fit well together there. He's into helping kids and families, as we all are, but he had a real passion for it too. But when you got to West Coast, you came to work at the academy. Also, you were an instructor and became one of the most, I guess, sought after instructors. You were doing so many different things. How was that when you walked in, deciding, okay, now I'm going to take what I learned and try to share it with others? What's some of your experiences in having that happen? How did it all work out for you?
You know, it was great. I was really nervous teaching in front of that class. I taught a lot of martial arts when I was young, but never a sit down class. And it was a little intimidating. I remember we had a sergeant from LAPD, 30 years retired. And in the first few minutes of my class, he threw his pencil down and said, "You're the teacher," because I was much younger than he was. And he challenged me quite a bit. He said, "Well, what do you think you can teach me? You know, I'm 30 years retired police detective, you know." And I made him a deal. I called him Sarge, and I said, "I'll make you a deal, Sarge. If you don't learn one new thing by the first break, you can go home. I'll give you an A. But if you learn one thing you didn't know, you got to stay till lunch." And the same rule applied. And at the end of the day, he shook my hand and said, "I had no idea from the civil side
Right.
how this
Well,
really worked and how prevent getting yourself in legal trouble doing that kind of stuff." And we ended up becoming very good friends. And that was a big challenge though, because the whole class, it was my first day, and the whole class looked at me. They're like, "Oh boy, you got a challenge on your hands, Buster."
well, and what was interesting, with all when I would have people come out of LAPD or even the federal agencies and come to work in the private sector, you would send them out on a case and they would go out and they'd come back and hand you a half a page report that said the facts. Well, here are the facts, ma'am. And
Yeah,
it was, okay, what about this? Well, no, this is what happened. Okay. But in the private sector, we have to have how it all happened, why it all happened, and answer all the questions so the client can look at that and say, oh, is that all you're going to charge me for what you're doing? But if we give them
yeah,
a half a page report, they would have said, well, what are you guys doing? The
yeah.
guys in the public sector don't understand that. I came out of the public sector, so I knew that it was a different approach. And it's hard sometimes to get these guys coming out to learn that. But when they learn it, though, then they really become good because they have both sides of it. But
That's true.
um, what was some of your other experiences, and how did you find? Of course, we were training so many people. We had the West Coast Detectives and Training Academy. I started like in the late '80s, and then we're about 20 years we were there, trained hundreds and hundreds. And I think the credit to that academy was, and I did very little instruction in all of it. Even in the early days, I did some, but I was out working and I looked for people that had the gift in teaching really more, people that would go on. We had one of the highest ratings of all the vocational academies for people being hired. We had, after a few years, we became so well known by what the instructors were doing, and that people knew that if they were a graduate of West Coast Detectives Training Academy, they were trained. They knew their stuff,
Yeah.
and they had jobs waiting for them. And that was really a testament to yourself and others that were really passionate about it. But how did you find some of these people, they're coming in, they've no idea what our field is like. They're being rehabilitated. They're on a work comp thing, so they have to take some kind of training. So they say, "Oh, I'll be a private investigator." How did you
Right.
find a lot of these? So what were some of your experiences of that?
With the people coming in, that's just like you said, you get people, they have a choice of schools they can go to as part of their physical rehabilitation. And they go off what they saw in Magnum PI and things like that. And then when they get into class, they find out, well, this is not at all like it's portrayed on television. And
Right.
surveillance is not glamorous and can't be done from a red convertible Ferrari. I think
Yeah.
there was a lot of challenge just with getting them to understand that it's not anything, everything you saw on TV, forget about it. We had such a wide variety of people, single moms and ex-police and everybody in between. And everybody was a little different experience. And I learned to teach in some different ways, to communicate in different ways,
Yeah.
because not everybody understands one method of teaching.
And I think that you've said something important there, because if somebody goes to the police academy, they don't follow the rigid rules pretty fast. They phase out. Where
Right.
our job was to try to keep the people in there to help them obtain a success and complete the course. So, like you said, it happened to adjust to helping people in their way to learn, and was something that we looked at as part of our job, not just to say who can we kick out, who can we 86 and get off. So, how were the skills did you find the writing skills? How across the board? How did that's a important part of an investigator's job in the private sector. How did you find people in those areas? Did they have it, or was it tough getting them to learn that?
It was actually tough. Once in a while, you would have a student that was real adept at writing. Most of the time, though, you'd have to teach them how to write. We just have a different methodology of writing our reports and investigations,
Yes.
and depending on if you're providing it to a client, or in cases that I've worked where you're providing it to a corporate entity that you're working for, it may be a different format, a different layout. For corporations, you need to be pretty legal savvy and
Yes.
understand a lot of paralegal work and word it properly so an attorney can pick it up and take it into a courtroom and understand what you're saying. And it's a lot of things to learn there. You can't sign off on something.
That's right. That's
It
right.
just doesn't make
That's right.
sense. I know we use that, but in a
Yeah.
report, you can't use things like that. So it was quite challenging, and the report writing was so critical. It's so important. And you remember Dolph Taylor from back then, and he's out here in Texas now too. And for a while, I was just writing his reports for him until he kind of got the hang of it. But everybody learns it at some point.
What's so rewarding is hearing from people today. Still, I'm getting calls every once in a while. Do you still have the training academy there? We'd like to go. Or somebody that says, I went there 20 years ago, and is so and so still around? And, or asking some kind of a question, but they've been successful. So many people went out and were successful in the private investigative field in different areas, and so many women that,
Yes,
and I always said a woman is a better investigator than a man if she really likes
I
it.
agree.
She's got those instincts that can fit in places. But well, that's always, I think about that academy and the different things we were able to contribute to people's lives, not only the clients in helping them solve a mystery or find out something they'd always wanted to know, but also helping people become investigators that they could go on and help other people. So that was rewarding there. But so
That was it.
you decided you moved on. I think when you left California, you left us. So you came to Texas. Was that when you went to Texas?
Well, I deployed over to Iraq from California.
Oh, from California. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that was the first. And about what year was that when you went over?
Uh, I went for my training in the end of 2004 and deployed at the beginning of 2005.
Okay, I thought that was. All right, so here you are. What in the world took you now on the? Here's a guy that has a nonprofit helping kids get adopted that were left without parents, who was involved in those kind of things, and now you're going to a battle zone, but you won't be carrying a gun and all the support that these other guys have. So how did that happen?
That was really different. One thing we should touch on is why I went. And
Yes.
I had an investigation in New York. It was a electronic measure, countermeasure. This woman was being stalked, and I was to go out there for a week and gather the information. And I was supposed to leave a few days before 9/11 occurred, and my flight was canceled. And then 9/11 did occur, and I couldn't get a flight, obviously, for a couple of weeks. And the first chance I got, I flew out to New York and conducted my investigation. And while I was there, I did go down to ground zero, and it was still burning, and there was still the awful odors and things like that. And there are people still out there praying for their loved ones. And it was just at a point where you knew that nobody was going to walk out of that. I was very emotional. It hit me very emotionally. And I really felt like I wanted to a piece of whoever did this. So
Right.
one morning I saw that Halliburton and Kellogg Brown and Root was hiring contractors to go overseas. And I said, well, I'm, a little late for the military, but I could go do that. And so I applied and they called me immediately. And that's why I went over there.
All right. All right. So you left California, wound up in Iraq, and I'm assuming you'd never been in that part of the world before.
No, never been to
Yeah.
Iraq before.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, what was it like when you hit the ground in Iraq, and what did you go through? Obviously, some more training before they threw you out and doing whatever. But what was the
Yeah,
process?
no. Once you landed there, they have training classes here and there that they keep you updated about your biological, nuclear, biological, and chemical training, and your suit. That's all done in Houston, and all the other training. A couple of weeks of training you go through, and then when you get there, it's almost like a whole nother country.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was different, and it was a very nasty time in Baghdad, and a lot of incoming, and you really don't know how you're going to react to those things until you go through it. And I just took it in stride and worked at the Baghdad airport for a while, and then got to be a security technician and worked my way up to a security coordinator with a government secret clearance, and went on to Afghanistan, where I drove convoys and led convoys through Kabul for quite a while, and eventually came back to Iraq as the one of 5 global senior investigators for Brown and Root.
Mm. So your journey there started when you were, was it security related, or was it later that you wound up in the truck convoys and whatever? So you started out doing security related things when you got there?
No, I started out at Baghdad Airport, loading and unloading airplanes, and
Mm.
coordinating the the packages going outbound and inbound. And it was the JMMT, the Joint Military Mail Terminal. Worked for the Air Force,
Right.
worked for the and was just wanting to get there to get my foot in the door. And then finally, after some time, I applied for the security job, and they realized that I was pretty sorely underpaid for what my skills were, and I wasn't in the right position. And so
Right.
I took the promotion to go to Afghanistan. I went to Kandahar first as a security technician. It was in Bagram, and then finally Kabul as a security coordinator. And we did base security and convoy security detail.
What,
Moved all over the place.
now you went from Iraq over to, or did you come back to the States and then back,
No,
or did
no,
you go
went
direct
from
over?
Iraq straight over to Afghanistan. You go over there thinking you're only going to be there a year or two, and it ended up being over 6 years I was over there.
All right. Wow. And so that was just on one deployment, but did you come back to the States anytime during that time?
Well, we got a short R&R every 4 to 6 months. I think the longest I went without a day off or vacation was 7 months. You work 13-hour days over there, 7 days a week. There's not like you're gonna go to the movie theater or go bowling.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
work,
It's
and then
work.
when you
Work.
can sleep, when they let you sleep. Really interesting way of life over there, and pretty hard.
How was it with your obviously sensitivity to children and all that? What kind of things did you see there? How did you react to that? Or obviously there had to be difficult situations that you saw, particularly young people. And how did that affect you?
It was atrocious, really. For an example, in Kabul, I was at a small base not too far from the embassy called Camp Phoenix, and there was a lot of children without parents out in front of that. For some reason, they would hang out in front of the gate of that base, and we would sneak them stuff out of the dining facility. We'd give them cookies and muffins and bottles of water. Well, this one little girl there, she was really dirty. She had a little torn dress, and her only toy was a leg of a Barbie doll. And
Oh,
that just hit me. I mean, if you're gonna hit me in the heart, that's where you're gonna do it. And so I started to do toy drives here in the States. My sister was working at a hospital and had everybody given toys and coloring books and things like that. They'd send them over to me, and I'd give them out to the kids as much as I could until I didn't work there anymore. I
well,
moved on.
staying on with the heart and hands of Jesus, helping children. How did the mechanics of that work? People think about, oh, well, I'd like to help, but how do you get things there? So was it easy to ship gifts and
Yeah.
like that over there?
Yeah. Postal service flew into Iraq, but it wasn't like postal aircraft or anything. It was all charter aircraft. and some military aircraft. We did a lot of the big Russian IL-76s and C-130s. We did Chinooks and everything else, but that stuff would the U.S. Postal Service was great.
Oh,
They would send anything, to an APO, and it didn't take forever. It would only take 2 or 3 weeks, which was pretty impressive, seeing how where we
right.
were. I know that in Baghdad in 2005, we moved more cargo than London Heathrow in 1 year. That
Wow.
was pretty impressive. We're talking about a pretty tiny crew. I think there was 13 on my crew and 20 on the other. Not a lot of people working there.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of problem with stuff disappearing, and if everything got there, was it like there was local hands got involved in it, and so stuff would
Yeah.
disappear? Oh,
No,
that's
the mail would come straight to the US military, and then we would handle it. We
wow.
handled all the
Wow.
ingoing and outgoing mail there. It never went through the Iraqi post office. As long as you put an APOA address and didn't put Iraq on it, it
Yeah,
would go to a US address, which
right.
is
Wow.
an APO is our property when we're there.
Well, it sounds like your concern, passion, and compassion for people and things continued on. And well, also, it didn't only continue with kids; it also got into some animals. Now, if you can, people can see this. I don't know whether they can or not. This is two refugees. They came here legally, folks. They did not sneak across the border. Now, and we could talk about that a lot. The one
Yeah.
all right. So, how in the world, how did all that start? The
Well, that's another thing is if you can imagine how poor the kids were there, the animals weren't treated very well at all.
yeah,
Kabul was horrible. The animals were sick, abused, not fed. They're mostly wild. There's also dogs, and they use most of the dogs that are used there are for goat herding. So there's most of the dogs that come from over there have some type of herding breed in them because they
right.
herd goats. But we had an opportunity to get Faith. We got her almost 7 years ago through some of the ASPCA International and some. Don't want to say we pulled any strings or anything like that, but we knew enough people to make that
Right.
happen to where we were able to bring Faith here. And she had burns on her, and she was not. I mean, she was really terrified. She could tell she was terrorized, and now she's herself, and she's opened up. Now we just got Hunter a month ago from Kabul, and there's a animal rescue in Kabul called Kabul Small Animal Rescue, and they rescue all these animals that they can. And they had run out of funding, and they had put a notice up that they were going to euthanize this dog as well as some others. So we got involved in that and were able to raise $4,000 on the internet in about 3 weeks. And that facilitated Hunter coming here. And we're still working with him,
Yeah.
but he's a good dog. And it's just a matter of the two dogs have to learn to like each other now. We're still, they play a lot, but they're still not sure. But I'm really glad we did it.
Well, it seems like I've heard someplace back over my life that the qualities of a man can be discerned from how they treat children and animals. And I think having that love also for those myself, I appreciate that. And I wasn't aware of some of those things that you had in your life, but that's commendable, Chris, that you took advantage of the places you were in, the opportunities that
Yes,
you were given in life to go to make a difference. And it wasn't just about, well, you had a passion to go because of what was happened here, but then you saw you could make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's one thing that I see in so many people that in our field I've watched them come through West Coast, but your story is one that I think is commendable to everyone that if you're out there, you're interested in the private investigative field or security related field, law enforcement field, remember it's how you care about and treat people, which is a
that is
really
right.
key to life. And animals, of course, can fit right into there. I'm a German Shepherd guy myself. I grew up with them and I have a special place in my heart for them. But well, Chris, I know that you've got a busy day tomorrow and you're working now in Galveston. In fact, we
Yeah.
visited you a few months ago and had a great dinners and spent some time together. It was great seeing down around Galveston. And now, how did you wind up getting from Iraq, Afghanistan, security related field helping kids, bringing dogs over, and now you're taking care of boats. How did
Yeah.
that all work?
Well, I always had a background in mechanics, and one thing I was doing part time when I was teaching at West Coast, I was building NASCAR engines for late model and participating in the crew, chief mechanic, then a crew chief for Jeff Salem, number 21 late model. He's out there in Arcadia. And I had a background there. And when I came home from Iraq and Afghanistan, well, it was while we were over there that my wife found this house here on Tiki Island. And the price of a house here compares to something in LA with bars on the windows. It was no comparison. So without really thinking too much about the future, what I was going to do when I came home, and we went ahead and bought the house here and moved out here. And my sister followed, and Dolph came out here, and now you're out here. So I have a lot of familiar faces around here. And I was had to have a knee surgery after I came home, and I was really not able to ambulate very much for at least 6 months, almost a year. And I was kind of bored, and I was actually starting to look at some schools, some investigative schools to teach up in Houston. Didn't find anything I really liked. And a local boat mechanic I'd become friends with, he offered me a job. He goes, "Well, if you're not doing anything, why don't you come work on boats?" I said, "Okay." So I did that, learned all about the outboards and already knew the inboards. So I
Well,
worked for a few years, and he retired, and I went and started my own business, and
good.
haven't really looked back.
Well, you've had a variety of things in your life that you've taken on, and hey, who knows what's around the corner? I've learned that opportunity doesn't matter about how old you are; it can come.
No.
So you never know with the things you've done in life. We'll see what's next around the corner. But Chris, it's great catching up with you and learning some things about you that I didn't know that I should have, or maybe I've forgotten in my old age. But I commend you on those, and I'm just glad that you were part of West Coast and you added your technical skills, but your compassion for people and for other things, and I appreciate that in you. So we look forward. We'll get together again here, and I'll have to this coming year. We'll figure out a time to do that. And I'm always glad to hear about what you're doing. So, any last thought you might want to give to anybody out there watching?
Eh, one thing I learned is try anything and everything, even if you don't think you're gonna like it. And that's not just experiences. It goes along with food and travel. Well, my wife was over in the Middle East as well. We were together at some point in Baghdad, and it was so expensive to fly home that it was cheaper just to go explore the world on that side. And we got to go see some of the most amazing things and ride camels through the desert in Egypt,
Right.
and drove Aruba and went to South Africa, done with great white sharks, and went on safari. And we went to
Oh,
Greece. Went to all the matter of fact, I proposed to her in the middle of the Mediterranean on a cruise ship.
oh,
No,
fantastic.
and we tried every food you could try and tried to experience everything we could, and went to places that were really off the beaten path. And it helped give you a little understanding that culture in the other places is so different
Yes.
from what we're familiar with here in the US. And it really opens up your eyes to necessities and other things. That it gives you a little experience on better communication skills. You just try everything at least once, even if it's a raw oyster, try it,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's been said that for children, some of the best education they can have is to travel and get to see the rest of
Absolutely.
the world. You get an understanding of the world. Well, it sounds like, yes, you have done that. And that's a great way that we can leave people with, hey, check out that dream you've been thinking about and try it. You
Try
could
it. Just
really
try it.
wind up, yeah, being successful. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for being on. We'll look forward to catching up with you in the future and seeing you guys soon. Give your wife our best, and we'll look forward to that, hearing about what your next adventures are down the road. So,
Okay,
absolutely.
sounds good.
Yeah. So, all right, guys, remember, if you like these videos, we want you to hit that subscribe button and share it and let other people know. And send us any questions. We get questions and comments all the time about different things. You might want to know about what does the private investigator do? Can they help you? I'm having those kind of requests from people, whether it's background checks or research, legal cases, surveillance, or whatever it might be. Reach out and we'll help you in any way we can or get you to somebody that can. And you can leave a comment on any of the podcasts, or you can email me at pi777 at gmail.com. Until next time, may God bless you, your family, and may God bless America. Stay safe.